My name is Michael. I am 39 years old. I am an ordinary American living in a quiet suburb in Northern California. I have been married to Laura for 10 years, and during this time our life seemed quite stable and happy to me. We did not have children, but we had a cozy two-story apartment and a dog named Buddy. Over the last couple of years, I had noticed that Laura was troubled by something. She was often thoughtful and distant. At first, I thought it was a normal stage in life. Everyone has periods of doubt. I myself sometimes felt tired of the routine work, home, the rare weekend by the ocean. We were both approaching 40, middle age was creeping up on us. One evening, Laura started a conversation that surprised me. We were eating pasta with pesto sauce at our wooden kitchen table. The light from the lamp fell on her face, and she barely made eye contact. "Mike," she began quietly, twirling her spaghetti with her fork, "I've been thinking. I think I need to get away for a while. Alone." I put my fork down, raising my eyebrows in surprise. She had never suggested anything like this before. "Leave? Where exactly?" I asked calmly. "There's a self-knowledge retreat," Laura said, finally looking at me. Uncertainty flashed in her brown eyes. "It's for a week. I read about it online. There are groups, a psychologist, meditation practice. I think it will help you understand yourself." I was silent for a few seconds, considering what I had heard. On the one hand, it sounded unexpected. On the other, the idea of going to a psychological retreat didn't seem so bad to me. We both believed in the need to take care of our mental health, if she needed it. "Okay," I said, trying to smile encouragingly. "If you feel like you need this retreat, go ahead. I can handle Buddy here. Work, home, everything will be fine." Laura clearly didn't expect me to agree so easily. Her shoulders relaxed. She smiled cautiously in response. "Thank you for understanding," she said quietly. "Really, thank you. It's important to me." That night we went to bed at our usual time, but I couldn't fall asleep for a long time. Laura's back was turned to me. She was breathing evenly, already asleep. I looked at the ceiling and thought about what was happening. It seemed like nothing terrible. My wife wanted to go on a retreat. It was only a week. But the inner anxiety wouldn't leave me. I recalled the last few months. Laura began to spend more time on the phone, often leaving the room to take calls. When I asked her, she usually answered that it was work-related or that a friend was calling. I believed her. I had no reason not to. But now, looking at the dark ceiling, I suddenly realized that our conversations over dinner had become more superficial, our kisses shorter, and our smiles rarer. Maybe the retreat would really help her understand herself. Or maybe the problem was deeper. I didn't know. But part of me refused to believe that there could be a gap between us. We had been through so much together. I couldn't help but immerse myself in memories. We had just met. I was 28 then, she was 25. We met at a party of mutual friends. Laura captivated me at first sight with her ringing laugh and ability to keep up a conversation. Soon we began a romance full of passion and endless conversations all night long. I remembered how I proposed to her a year later in a small restaurant on the coast by candlelight. Her eyes were shining with happiness. She said yes in a trembling voice. It was one of the best moments of my life. Then there was the wedding, cheerful, warm, among family and friends. We danced until we dropped, made plans for the future, vowed to love each other in sorrow and in joy. I remember those years after the wedding as the most serene time. We laughed a lot, traveled around the country, cooked dinner together in the evenings, chatting about everything under the sun. Of course, there were quarrels like everyone else, but we always made up, considering our love strong. Now, lying in the darkness that night, I tried to figure out, where did it all go? When did the crack run through our marriage? Did I miss something? Did I miss her pain somewhere? These thoughts weighed heavily on my soul. I met the dawn with them, not sleeping a wink until morning. The night before we left, I helped her pack. We made a list together: comfortable clothes, sneakers, a warm blanket in case the nights were chilly, a notebook to write things down. She showed me the website of the retreat. The photos were of people sitting in a circle on a lawn, all smiling, surrounded by nature. somewhere in the Sierra Nevada mountains, a couple of hours away. It looked pretty harmless. I asked how much it would cost to attend such a retreat. Laura said she had saved up for it in advance, and I shouldn't worry about money. I didn't mind if she had planned it all out. It meant she really needed it. On the day of her departure, I woke up early to take Laura. She hugged me tightly at the bus stop as we said goodbye. I felt her heart beating hard. She was probably worried. I was worried too, although I tried not to show it. "Don't worry about me," Laura said, adjusting the strap of her shoulder bag. "There won't be much of a connection there, but I'll be back in a week and everything will be fine." "Of course," I nodded, patting her hand. "I'll be waiting. Take care of yourself, okay?" She hugged me again, then, unexpectedly, kissed me very tenderly as she had not kissed me for a long time. I even felt pain from this sudden caress, as if she was saying goodbye, as if she was going not for a week, but forever. This thought was so frightening and absurd that I immediately brushed it aside. There is no point in inventing unnecessary things. It was strange to realize that we wouldn't be able to even call or text each other this entire week. In our times of smartphones, it seemed wild, but I understood that this was a condition of the program. So it had to be this way, complete withdrawal into oneself without external contacts. The first day without Laura was surprisingly calm. I got up in the morning, fed Buddy, and went to work as usual. There was a lot to do, and it distracted me from the unusual silence at home. My colleagues knew that my wife had gone away for a week to do self-discovery, and a couple of them even joked with me at lunch, saying, "Expect your enlightened spouse to return." I smiled, pretending not to worry. Deep down, I really tried to believe that everything was okay. In the evening, the house was empty and quiet. Without Laura, the house seemed strange. Buddy walked from room to room, whining every now and then he was looking for his mistress. I missed her myself. I caught myself wanting to dial her number, just to hear her voice. But I reminded myself, the connection is almost impossible at the retreat. Besides, she herself asked not to be disturbed. I had to endure it. On my second day at the office, I found myself thinking about her more and more often. What was she doing now? How was her day going? I wanted her to come back rested and happy. Maybe this vacation would actually do her some good. However, by the evening of the second day, the anxiety did not let up. I came home again, cooked dinner just for myself and Buddy. I sat in the empty living room in front of the TV, but even my favorite baseball game did not distract me. Strange questions were spinning in my head. Why did she need this retreat now? Why did she say there would be no connection? After all, even in the mountains, you can usually find a place where there is a network, at least occasionally. On the third day in the morning, I was already having trouble working. The feeling that something was wrong was growing. A colleague, my friend Steve, noticed my absent-mindedness. During a coffee break, he asked if everything was okay at home. I answered briefly that I just missed my wife. Steve patted me on the shoulder. "A few more days, and she'll be back. Hang in there, Mike." I nodded, trying to smile, but inside I was clenching. At lunchtime, I couldn't stand it any longer. I took out my phone and stared at the number listed on the retreat website. They wrote that emergency calls could be made to the coordinator. Of course, my situation wasn't an emergency, but I was restless. Why not just find out how things were going? Maybe leave a message for Laura so she could call me back when she could. I walked away from the office to the street and, finding a quiet spot by the wall, pressed the number. A few beeps and a female voice answered. "Good afternoon, Rivers of Knowledge Center, I'm listening." I quickly introduced myself and explained that I was the husband of a retreat participant. I said I was worried because I had not heard from my wife and asked her to pass on a message, or at least confirm that she was okay. "What is your wife's name?" the woman asked in a businesslike tone. "Laura Brown," I answered, feeling my heart pounding. She asked me to wait. I heard her talking to someone, clarifying the list of participants. A minute later, she returned to the phone. "Sorry, but we don't have Laura Brown among our participants right now. Perhaps she's registered under a different name." I felt a chill inside. "No, She was supposed to come to the race 3 days ago, I said slowly. Maybe she canceled the trip at the last minute. The woman was silent for a moment, then answered. Laura Brown's name doesn't appear on the registration lists at all. Not under any surname. She may not have signed up for this course. I'm sorry, I can't help you any further. I mumbled a thank you and hung up. The phone almost fell out of my hands. I stood with my back against the cold brick wall of the office building. My head was buzzing. Laura hadn't gone to the retreat. She'd lied to me. Why? Where did she really go? I remembered seeing her off to the bus. Was that a hoax too? Maybe there was no bus from the retreat. I tried feverishly to remember everything. There really were people with backpacks at the bus stop. The bus arrived on time, a big tourist one. Laura got on. It all looked real. But I didn't pay attention to the details. I took their word for it. I needed to find out the truth. I returned to my desk, trying to stop my hands from shaking. My colleagues asked me something, but I think I brushed it off, citing urgent matters. I had one thought in my head: check our bank accounts and statements. Opening my online bank on my computer, I quickly found the latest transactions from our shared credit card. When I saw the list, my stomach turned even colder. There were expenses I hadn't expected. On the day of Laura's departure, in the morning purchase of an air ticket in her name. Flight San Francisco-Seattle. That same day, payment for a hotel in Seattle for 3 nights. The next day, several transactions from cafes and restaurants in Seattle. Seattle? We had no friends or relatives in Seattle. What was she doing in Washington State if she said she was going to the mountains of California? My heart was pounding, and my mind was already putting the puzzle together. There was a man in Seattle that Laura had once known. Her ex-boyfriend, David, had moved there a few years ago. I vaguely remembered her mentioning it a long time ago. I had run into David in a group of friends before we got married, and I didn't like him. He was a smug guy. But Laura insisted that there had been nothing between them for a long time, just friendly greetings on social media. So she lied about that too. It looks like it. Otherwise, why would she have flown there? I felt my palms getting wet. I wanted to smash my fist into the computer screen, but in the office that would be madness. I forced myself to breathe deeply. The people around me were tapping rhythmically on their keyboards, unaware that my world had just exploded. There were a couple of hours left in the workday. I realized I couldn't sit here and pretend nothing had happened. I grabbed my jacket and ran out of the office, muttering something to a confused Steve. I needed to get home fast before I did something stupid. The journey took about 30 minutes, but I barely remembered how I got there. I was driving in a fog. A couple of times I was blinded by the headlights of oncoming cars, and only a sharp honk of the horn brought me back to reality when I automatically passed an intersection on a flashing yellow light. My heart was pounding loudly, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Several times I caught myself driving significantly above the speed limit, and I was forced to let off the gas. Perhaps it was good that the road passed without incidents in such a state. It would have been easy to get into an accident. But luck saved me, and soon my home streets were ahead. Images were spinning in my head. Laura with a suitcase, leaving the Seattle airport, David meeting her. He hugs her. They go into the hotel together. I was shaking from these images. When I got home, I slammed the front door and only then let out what was boiling inside. I threw my jacket on the floor, cursed loudly, the empty walls echoed, and I think even punched the door frame. Buddy hid under the table. The dog had never seen me in such a state. I myself did not remember myself like this. After about 10 minutes, the rage subsided, replaced by devastation. I sank down on the couch, covering my face with my hands. Deception. The person closest to me lied to me, betrayed our lives for the sake of. For the sake of what? A connection with an ex? Adrenaline? New sensations? Without knowing the exact answer, I knew the main thing. When Laura returned from her fake trip, she would no longer find me the same. Something irreversibly collapsed the moment I saw the bank statement. Perhaps it had already collapsed earlier, I just refused to notice. I sat there in silence for a long time. Buddy came up to me carefully and laid his head on my lap, as if trying to comfort me. I stroked him mechanically. One thought was pounding in my head: what to do next. By nightfall, I had calmed down a bit. I didn't answer my calls. Steve had called me several times, worried about why I had left so suddenly. I sent him a quick message that everything was fine, just a small family problem, then turned off the phone. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Before going to bed, I made a firm decision. I would first listen to what Laura had to say when she returned. Perhaps part of me still hoped that there would be some rational explanation other than betrayal. Well, I would soon find out. There were 2 days left until she was supposed to return home. The day after my discovery passed in a fog. I could barely find a place for myself. I would sit for a minute, then get up and wander around the house aimlessly. Several times I went into the bedroom and just stood there, looking at our marital bed. Happy moments popped into my head. Laura and I choosing this bed in the store, laughing, trying out the mattresses for softness. Here is the first night in this house, still boxes everywhere, and we opened champagne sitting on the floor. It seemed like it was in another life and with other people. I tried to imagine how I would talk to her when she returned. Every time, this image caused a heaviness in my chest. Words got stuck. I didn't know if I could calmly listen to her excuses, or, even worse, lies. I caught myself thinking that what I was most afraid of was not the fact of betrayal itself, it had already happened, but that she would start to dodge, twist, pretend that nothing terrible had happened. Or, on the contrary, that she would fall to her knees in front of me, sobbing. Both seemed unbearable. Towards evening, I understood. I don't want and won't make a scene. I won't listen to anything. Every hour of waiting is too painful for me. If I see her with her eyes, in which guilt or irritation are probably mixed, I might lose my temper. Say too much, yell. No, I don't want that. I have the right to leave with dignity. The decision came instantly, like a click. I already knew what to do. I would leave before she returned. I would simply disappear from her life as much as possible, without a scandal, without a showdown. Let her say whatever she wants later, my conscience would be clear. I sat down at the kitchen table, opening the lid of my laptop. There were practical issues to sort out. Housing first and foremost. I had nowhere to go except to stay with friends or a hotel for the time being. I decided to call Steve, the same colleague who had been worried about me. Steve and I had worked side by side for a long time and sometimes had a beer after work. He had invited Laura and me to his barbecue more than once. He had a big house. If anyone could help me out now, it was him. I found Steve's number on my phone and pressed call. He answered almost immediately. "Hi, Mike. How are you? You scared me yesterday. You ran away suddenly." "Hey, Steve," I said wearily. "Listen, I've got some serious problems. I might need a place to stay for a few days. Could I stay at your place tonight?" Steve was silent for a second, apparently digesting what he had heard. "Hey, sure, buddy, no questions. Just, what happened? Did you and Laura have a fight?" "You could say that," I smiled wryly, although he couldn't see it. "I'll tell you later. Thank you, Steve. I'm very grateful to you." "Don't be silly, Mike. Come whenever you want. The guest room is free." I thanked him again and hung up. It was a little easier to realize that at least I had a place to sleep. Then I started packing my things. We had a big suitcase on wheels and several travel bags. I decided to take only the most necessary things: clothes, documents, a laptop, chargers, a few personal items. I was leaving all our jointly acquired things: furniture, dishes, equipment. I didn't care, to be honest. Let her keep it. While I was putting t-shirts and shirts in my suitcase, I noticed a family photo album on the shelf. I took it out and opened it at random. Here we are, Laura and I, on our first vacation together, young, tanned, laughing against the backdrop of the Grand Canyon. Here we are at a New Year's party with friends, Laura in a red dress. I am hugging her. We are so happy. As I turned the pages, I didn't notice how tears came to my eyes. I closed the album and clutched the cover tightly. My heart was pierced with pain. "Why?" I whispered. No one heard it in the empty house. There was no answer, of course. Only Buddy came up and nuzzled my side, sensing my condition. I hugged the dog around the neck. "Sorry, Buddy. You'll have to stay with her," I said hoarsely. "Take care of her, okay?" Buddy looked at me with devoted eyes. I decided that I would not take the dog. Laura loved him, and he would be better off in a familiar home. And tearing him away from the yard, the dacha, the familiar environment was cruel. Let the dog at least stay. Once the things were packed, the hard part came. I sat down at the desk in the living room, put a clean sheet of paper in front of me. I had to write her a note. What should I say in this case? How should I choose the words? I stared blankly at the blank sheet of paper for a few minutes. Then I started writing, and the words came out on their own, simple and clear. No accusations, no rudeness. I wanted to keep my respect for myself, and even for her, strange as it may seem, to the end. After all, 10 years of marriage can't disappear without a trace, even if she crossed them out. I wrote as I felt. In the note, I laid out everything briefly to the point. I explained that I knew about her lies and where she had spent the week, that I did not want scandals and showdowns, so I was leaving. I said that all our things and the house were hers. I did not claim anything. I wished her happiness, since she had found her happiness not with me. I asked her not to try to look for me. After rereading what I had written, I added a couple more phrases in the margins that came to mind. That, despite everything, I am grateful to her for the years we spent together, and that I will try to forgive her, because I need it for my own peace of mind. I didn't know if she would appreciate these words or even read the note to the end. But it didn't matter anymore. I carefully folded the letter in half and placed it on the coffee table in the living room in the most visible place. I left the wedding ring next to it, having taken it off my finger. That's it. Period. It was getting close to the time when the bus that Laura was taking was due to return. Allegedly was driving from a retreat. I didn't know her exact schedule, but I expected her to arrive on Sunday evening. To avoid a chance meeting, I decided to leave early. Taking a last look at the house, I felt a bitter feeling. A significant part of my life had passed here, but I was taking with me not a thing, not furniture, only memories, and they were now ruined. I took the suitcase, bags, checked that everything was turned off the light. I stopped before leaving. My chest ached. I knew that once I closed this door, there would be no way back. "Goodbye," I said quietly, addressing either the empty house or our past life. I closed the door, exhaled, and walked towards the car with a firm step. A new stage of life awaited me, no matter how unknown and scary it seemed now. When Laura returns home, she will find only empty rooms, my letter, and her reflection in it. That same night, I went to Steve's place as agreed. It was a strange feeling to find myself on someone else's guest couch instead of my own bedroom. Steve didn't ask any unnecessary questions, seeing my state. He just patted me on the back, said he was happy to help, and left me alone, warning me that I could take whatever I needed from the kitchen. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how Laura was probably home by now, reading my letter. My heart sank at the thought that she was alone there, perhaps crying or furious, or maybe she didn't care. No, I doubt it. 10 years of marriage don't pass without emotion. My phone was on the nightstand. I'd kept it off since I'd left, dreading the onslaught of calls. Now, I suddenly had a burning desire to know how she'd reacted. It was like an obsession. Part of me wanted to hear her justify herself or plead with me to come back, and another part of me was afraid I'd lose it if I heard her voice. Around midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned on my phone, deciding beforehand that I wasn't going to get into any arguments, just check my messages. As soon as the phone booted up, it vibrated and the screen immediately filled with notifications. 15 missed calls from Laura, several voicemails, and countless text messages, plus 2 from Steve, apparently wanting to make sure I got there safely. I opened the messages. The first was sent around 7 p.m., right after she had apparently seen the empty house. "Mike, what's going on? Where are you?" Second, a few minutes later. "I found a letter. Please, let's talk. I can explain everything." The messages then became increasingly rambling. Laura wrote that she had made a mistake, that nothing serious had happened, and begged for a chance to discuss everything. Several messages simply consisted of one word, please. In the voicemails, I heard her crying. In one, she sobbed, forgive me. I was stupid. Come back, I beg you. In another, in an angrier tone, how could you leave me like that, after so many years? Her mood clearly alternated between remorse and accusation. Listening to this mixed up sometimes tears, sometimes anger, I felt more tired than hurt. Apparently, I had already burned out over these last few days. There was emptiness inside. I responded with just one short message, gathering my will into a fist so as not to slide into a long correspondence. Laura, I said everything in the letter. I'm sorry. Please don't look for me and take care of yourself. After pressing send, I immediately put my phone on silent mode. If I continue reading her pleas or reproaches, I won't be able to fall asleep at all. And tomorrow I have to go to work. I decided not to take time off. It's better to occupy my mind with something. But sleep still did not come for a long time. As soon as I closed my eyes, my imagination drew Laura, sitting alone in the empty house, with my letter in her hands. I tossed and turned on the creaky sofa in the guest room. Somewhere behind the wall, a clock was quietly ticking, and for some reason this sound got on my nerves. Closer to dawn, when I finally fell asleep, I dreamed that I was returning home, and Laura met me smiling, as if nothing had happened. In the dream, I almost burst into tears with relief, rushed to hug her. But then I woke up in the dark, in a strange room, with an acute sense of loss. I lay with my eyes open for a long time, staring at the ceiling, until the gray winter light began to dawn outside the window. That morning, over coffee in the kitchen, Steve asked me if I had changed my mind about talking to my wife. He must have heard my messages during the night. The phone vibrated a couple of times on the nightstand, though without making a sound. No, Steve, I shook my head. I've made my decision. There's no turning back. He nodded understandingly. He probably wanted to know the details, but he didn't rush me. I just said quietly, she cheated on me, went to another man. Steve's face contorted with genuine disappointment. Damn, Mike, buddy, I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. He was obviously as shocked as I was. Nothing, I squeezed out. That's it. I'm leaving. Steve squeezed my shoulder respectfully. We didn't discuss the matter any further for now, and I was grateful for his tact. The whole next day passed automatically. Work was really distracting. I tried to concentrate on the tasks, although if I thought for a minute, the image of Laura, sobbing with my letter in her hands, would appear before my eyes. I had to push these thoughts away. She didn't call again. Apparently, she was offended by my silent refusal to communicate. Or she was biding her time. Deep down, I knew she wouldn't give up so easily. That evening, when I returned to Steve, I found that Laura had written an email. Apparently, she had decided to address him in more detail. In the letter, she poured out her soul over several pages. As I read it, I closed my eyes several times from the overwhelming emotions. Laura described in detail how she was sorry and how she didn't mean to hurt me. She claimed that her relationship with David had been a mistake, a temporary blackout, that she had realized everything and wished she could turn back time. She cited a midlife crisis, that she had felt routine in the relationship and was looking for new sensations. She wrote that after our breakup, she broke up with David immediately and that he was not worth the little finger of our marriage. I was shocked by her words, but they could no longer mend the hole that had formed inside. I felt almost no jealousy towards that man. It's strange, but for me, betrayal killed trust and respect and did not cause banal male jealousy. Perhaps I just did not want to spend more energy hating him. Everything was between me and Laura. At the end of the letter, she begged me to meet at least once so she could apologize in person. She guaranteed that there would be no pressure, just a conversation. I stared at the screen with these lines for a long time. Part of me wanted to meet her, maybe to get some satisfaction, to see her remorse with my own eyes. But I imagined her crying or making excuses, and I realized no, it was too early. For me, that would only reopen the wound. I wrote back briefly and dryly that I saw no point in meeting and discussing the past, that it was better for both of us to move on. I wished her luck, and again asked her not to look for me. After that, I felt relieved. Maybe she would finally understand that I wouldn't change my mind. It had been about a month since I'd left. In that time, I'd moved out of Steve's and rented a small apartment closer to work. It was a modest one-bedroom loft furnished with the bare necessities. After the spacious house with family photos on the walls, the new place felt empty and foreign. But I was slowly getting used to being alone. In the evenings, I'd walk around the neighborhood, go to the gym, try to keep myself busy. Laura didn't bother me directly anymore. After my last letter, she apparently decided to leave me alone, at least temporarily. Perhaps she hoped that with time I would cool down and get in touch myself. But that didn't happen. However, the echo of our story reached me through mutual acquaintances. One afternoon, I received a call from a mutual friend of ours, Kate. We were not very close friends, but we used to get together in groups. I knew that Kate spent more time with Laura. The telephone conversation began with polite phrases, but Kate quickly switched to a concerned tone. "Michael, I don't want to pry into something that's none of my business, but I need to ask. What happened between you and Laura?" I paused. It was clear that Laura had already said something on her side. I wondered what exactly. "What does she say?" I asked cautiously. Kate sighed. "She says that you suddenly left, leaving her only a note, that you had some kind of crisis and you didn't want to find out anything. Laura is very worried." I clutched the phone tighter. It seemed Laura had left the most important thing unsaid. But to expose her to her friend, I didn't want to go into the dirty details, but it was also unpleasant to portray myself as a heartless fugitive. "Kate," I began quietly, choosing my words carefully, "this is not easy for me to talk about. Yes, I left unexpectedly, but there were reasons for that." "What kind?" she asked softly. I was silent for a few seconds. Then I decided that the truth would come out anyway, and I had nothing to be ashamed of. "Laura cheated on me," I said evenly. "She went to another man and lied to me about the retreat." There was silence on the line. Kate clearly hadn't expected that. "Oh my God," was all she whispered. "Laura didn't mention that." Of course, I couldn't help but smile bitterly. So the reason for my departure is quite real. I just didn't want to make a scene and sort things out. I decided that it would be better for both of us. "I'm sorry, Michael. I didn't know," Kate said, confused. "Laura looked so upset. We all thought you were, well, that I'm a scoundrel for leaving my wife," I finished for her. "That's how she puts it, isn't it?" "She hardly says anything, just cries," Kate sighed. "We felt like she wasn't telling us something. I I don't even know what to say now." "No need to say anything," I replied. "It's between Laura and me. But since you asked, here's the answer." Kate apologized several more times for disturbing me and gently asked if I minded if she spoke frankly with Laura about everything. I told her to do what she thought was right. We said goodbye. After the conversation, I sat for a long time, staring at the wall. On the one hand, I felt better that at least someone from her circle had learned the truth. On the other hand, it was disgusting to realize that behind my back, I was being portrayed as a heartless husband. Apparently, in order to make people feel sorry for herself, Laura hid her misdeed. I was not surprised few people would bring such things out in public. Pride would not allow it. That evening, for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself a glass of whiskey. My throat burned with the strong alcohol, but I needed it to relieve the tension. I thought about how far we had grown apart. We were living in parallel worlds now. In her world, she was a victim of her husband's sudden departure. In mine, I was healing from the blow she had dealt me. Sometimes I dreamed about Laura. I would wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, painfully aware that this was not just a bad dream, but reality. At such moments, a wave of loneliness would roll over me. But I held on. I knew that there was no way back, which meant I had to move forward step by step. The first big holiday that I would have to spend alone arrived. On Thanksgiving, Steve invited me to his house for dinner with his family. At first, I refused, not wanting to be a burden, but Steve literally dragged me into his house by force. The circle of his relatives' parents, sisters, nephews was noisy and cheerful. I was seated at a table set with turkey, mashed potatoes, and a dozen traditional dishes. Everyone laughed, clinked glasses, shared stories. I smiled too, played along with the general mood, and even actually cheered up for a while. But as soon as I was distracted, bitterness stirred inside. After all, a year ago on this holiday, I could not even imagine that I would sit at someone else's table without Laura by my side. We always gathered friends or went to visit relatives on such days. Now everything is different. After dinner, I thanked Steve and his family for the warm welcome and returned to my quiet apartment. I spent the rest of the holiday alone with Buddy, watching an old movie on TV. It was a little lonely, but I got through it. This was my new world, and I had to learn to live in it. On the other nights, I tried not to sit in complete silence. Sometimes I would turn on the TV just for background noise, news, sports, just to have some voices in the apartment. I tried reading a book a couple of times, but my thoughts kept returning to what had happened. Buddy followed me wherever I went, looking into my eyes with devotion. He became a real comfort to me, a living being who loved me unconditionally. I often talked to him out loud, sharing my experiences, and in a strange way it helped. In fact, he was my only family these days. A couple of days after the conversation with Kate, Laura's silence turned into a storm. First, I received a short, angry message from her. "Thank you for telling everyone about my mistakes. Very noble of you." It became clear that Kate had kept her promise and had spoken frankly with Laura. I didn't respond to this attack. After all, Laura herself had made me out to be someone she found useful in front of her friends. I had neither the strength nor the desire to start a spat over text messages. But Laura soon took a more decisive step. She called me. When I saw her name on the screen, I hesitated, but I still took the call the first time since I left. "What do you need?" I asked tiredly. "We need to meet," she said coldly instead of greeting him. Her voice was tense. "To talk about everything in a civilized manner. You can't run around forever." I swallowed my irritation. At least she was calm, not hysterical. Perhaps it really was time to discuss practical matters. "Okay," I answered after a pause. "Let's meet. Where and when?" We agreed to meet on neutral territory in a quiet cafe in the middle of the day, when there were few customers. I arrived before her and took a distant table. My heart was tingling unpleasantly with excitement. I hadn't seen Laura for over a month. She arrived on time. She looked thin and tired. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun. I even felt sorry for her for a moment, but then I reminded myself why we were here. "Hello, Michael," she said quietly, sitting down opposite him. "Hello," I answered dryly. We were silent for a few seconds. She looked down, then spoke. I wanted to apologize again. For everything." I nodded silently. It seemed like she was starting off right, but for some reason, it seemed to me that she had prepared more than just an apology. Laura continued, trying to speak evenly. "I think we should formalize the divorce. It will be better for both of us." The words sounded expected, but they still stung. Divorce. Even though I knew it was coming, it was unpleasant to hear it from her. "I agree," I squeezed out. "We need to get a divorce." "I hired a lawyer," she said, looking me in the face, "just to make sure everything is done properly. You don't mind, do you?" "No, I don't mind," I shrugged. She paused, then added quietly, "And one more thing. About the house and everything else. You left me the house, the car. Thank you." I nodded, not knowing what to answer. "But the thing is," she continued, "it's very hard for me financially alone right now. You left and, well, you know." I felt everything inside me tighten. "Here it is." "What do you mean?" I asked cautiously. Laura laced her fingers on the table. I mean, a house is great, but I have to pay a mortgage. And my salary alone. Well, I'm not sure I can handle it. Plus, there are a lot of bills, utilities, insurance. It's really hard for me right now. She spoke in a plaintive tone. Once it made me want to protect her. Now I heard only an attempt to play on pity. Laura, I said slowly, trying not to flare up, I understand you. But I gave you all our property. I have no claim on the house, the car, or the bank accounts. In the bank? She raised her eyebrows. Left me $5,000 in the accounts, and you think that's enough? I winced. Yes, I left a little cash. Mostly everything was invested in the house and things. You're a grown man, I said quietly. Work, earn money. Sell the house if you can't pay. I'm not obligated to provide for you now. The words came out harsher than I had intended. Laura turned pale. So that's it. Her eyes flashed with anger. 10 years of marriage, and you leave me with nothing. With nothing? I couldn't stand it, raising my voice. Then I came to my senses and lowered my tone. I left you everything, Laura. Everything we had. I only took my clothes. Excellent, she grinned maliciously. A house I can't keep and things. Generous, I must say. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to keep myself under control. Stop it. You made a choice, Laura. Now you reap the consequences. I don't have to fund your new life. That was my life, too, she said angrily, and you yourself destroyed everything by leaving. I smiled bitterly. Really? And who ruined everything before? Who lied and went to the ex? You didn't think about that. Laura blushed sharply and looked away. She was silent for a few moments, breathing quickly. So you won't meet me halfway, she said quietly at last. Won't you at least help me with payments for the time being? No, I answered wearily. Sorry, but no, I don't see any reason. She nodded, her face turning to stone. I see. Then I guess we'll meet in court. What? I narrowed my eyes. Are you going to demand alimony in a divorce due to the wife's fault? In our state, Laura said firmly, infidelity does not affect property division or support. Yes, I consulted. I have rights, Michael. I have invested a lot in this marriage, to my time, my energy, and I am not going to end up on the street. I was silent, struck by her cold determination. It was as if a different person was sitting in front of me, no longer a broken, tearful wife, but a calculating opponent. Do as you see fit, I said quietly. It will be as it will be. Laura pressed her lips together and stood up from the table. I didn't mean to let it come to this, she said, putting on her coat. But you're forcing me to. I shook my head. I think something else forced us both. She didn't answer, turned around, and quickly walked out of the cafe. The cafe was almost empty. There was no one at the other tables, only the barista behind the counter lazily leafing through a magazine, and a soft jazz melody was playing quietly from the speakers. Our table was in the corner of the room, by the large window, through which one could see the serene daytime landscape passers by hurrying about their business, and cars rolling steadily along the street. It seemed that the whole world was living its usual life, unaware of the drama unfolding in this corner of the cafe. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. My heart was pounding. The conversation had been difficult, but inevitable. There was no longer any doubt. A trial lay ahead of us. A few weeks after our difficult conversation in the cafe, I started getting strange hints from acquaintances. One colleague asked me if everything was okay at home, because he had seen something on the internet about me and Laura. I became wary. What else could Laura have done? Soon the answer came by itself. One evening, Steve, sitting on the phone, quietly cursed and looked at me in surprise. Mike, you have to see this. He handed me his smartphone. The screen was open to a crowdfunding website. The big headline read, "Help Laura restart her life." And below it was a photo of my sad-faced wife that I'd taken a couple of years ago on vacation. I felt the heat rise to my neck. I scrolled down and began to read the text she had posted. My name is Laura Brown. I am 37 years old. My world collapsed when my husband suddenly left after 10 years of marriage, leaving me our home and almost no financial support. I was left alone with a mental and financial burden that is difficult to bear alone. These months have been a serious test for me. But I don't lose hope. I found solace in spiritual practices and creativity. Now I dream of opening a small business making and selling special jewelry with spiritual meaning that would help people find themselves. This business will not only help me get back on my feet, but I hope it will also benefit others. I need your support to rent a small workshop, buy materials, and set up online sales. Also, the funds raised will go to paying off the most pressing debts, mortgage, utilities that hung over me after my husband left. Every contribution you make is a chance for me to start over and turn pain into new strength. Even if you can't help with money, please share this page. I believe that with kind support I can cope. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I tore myself away from the screen, feeling my hands shaking. Everything inside me was seething. So many omissions and twisted facts in one text. He left suddenly. Well, yes, of course. Why mention the reason? Almost no financial support, and the fact that I left her a house, a car, and money in the account apparently doesn't count. Acute debts. This is probably about the mortgage that she herself agreed to pay when we took it out. But what hit me the hardest was that she portrayed herself as a steadfast sufferer who turned pain into new strength. She collected money for her shop with spiritual jewelry. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Well, was all I exhaled, returning the phone to Steve. He looked at me with sympathy. Listen, I stumbled upon this by accident, seriously. Someone just shared it on a social network, and I had Laura as a friend, so it popped up. Everything's fine, I answered dully, although it wasn't fine. Thank you for showing me. At home, I was beside myself. I went to the same page on my laptop, reread everything from beginning to end again, winding myself up. Under the photo was a collection scale. In the first few days, Laura managed to collect almost $5,000 from sympathizers. The comments below were full of words of support. Strangers wrote how great she was, how they understood her and wished her luck. I was literally shaking with indignation. I closed my laptop, then opened it again. I couldn't believe that all this was really happening. My personal drama was on display, distorted into a fairy tale about a poor, abandoned wife, and people around her, knowing nothing, threw her money and kind words. At some point, I realized that if I didn't switch, I would do something stupid, write a sarcastic comment, or send an incriminating post in the heat of the moment. No, I definitely didn't want to get involved in a public squabble. I called my sister to vent. My younger sister Jennifer lived in another state, but we spoke often. She listened in silence as I spoke excitedly about Laura's page, and then quietly said, "Mike, calm down. Yes, it's low of her. But think about it, she probably really can't cope. Let her collect if people give. It doesn't concern you. You've cleared your conscience. It's just infuriating that she twisted everything," I said angrily. "She makes me seem like some kind of heartless monster." "These strangers don't know you," the sister said softly. "They don't care. And those who do know you know the truth. Don't take it personally." I took a deep breath, trying to pull myself together. Jenny was right. Who cares what some strangers think behind the screen? It shouldn't bother me. The main thing is to keep my distance and not react. "You're right," I finally said. "I'll try not to pay attention." "That's good," she approved. "Take care of yourself, brother." After the conversation, I did cool off a bit. The fundraising page continued on its own, and I could only watch from the sidelines. Laura had crossed a line by putting our story out there, however distorted, for people to judge. It said a lot about who she had become, or perhaps always been, but I tried not to dwell on it. In a couple of weeks, the fundraiser reached its goal. Judging by the updates on the page, Laura had collected about $10,000. In her thank you posts, she wrote that she was incredibly touched by the support and that she would soon begin implementing her project. Reading these latest messages, I only smiled bitterly. Well, at least the money was going to a cause and not just complaining. If this project helps her not to disappear, so be it. I could only guess how her spiritual jewelry venture would end if she collected the required amount. Sometime after the fundraiser began, Laura made good on her promise. She actually launched her own business. I found out about it by accident while scrolling through my Facebook feed. An ad popped up. Photos of Laura beaming an unnaturally wide smile, showing off bracelets and necklaces made of multicolored stones. The headline read, New Spiritual Jewelry Collection by Laura Brown, Find Your Inner Light. I followed the link to her page. It was a small online store with a fancy name like Soul Spark Jewelry, Spark of the Soul. On the main page, Laura was sitting in a lotus position in a light white dress, with beads and bracelets hanging around her. To be honest, it looked a little ridiculous having known her for so many years. I had never seen her interested in meditation or esotericism. Apparently, now she was diligently trying on a new image. I studied the assortment. They were selling various pendants with quartz and amethyst, bracelets of chakra balance, necklaces of inner harmony. Each product had a colorful description about how it would illuminate your soul or protect you from negative energy. The prices surprised me. For an ordinary bracelet of several stones and a rope she asked $5,100. The quality of the jewelry, frankly speaking, left much to be desired. Ordinary beads on an elastic band, slightly decorated with metal pendants with pseudo-symbols. The cost price of them is a pittance, but Laura correctly placed a bet on spiritual value. Apparently, that is why she raised the prices to the sky. According to the counter on the site, she even had some buyers. A couple of reviews, probably from friends, praised the products, saying, I feel amazing energy when I put this necklace on. I just shook my head. I even once stumbled upon her live broadcast on social media. Laura, with an inspired face, was telling viewers about the power of crystals and how her beads help tune the vibrations of the soul. Listening to these speeches, I could not shake off the feeling of unreality, as if this was a completely different woman, not the practical Laura I knew. Perhaps she herself believed in all this, or maybe she was just trying to convince herself and others. I sighed heavily and turned off the broadcast, feeling both pity and tired irritation. The About page stated that the founder, Laura, had survived a major life crisis and found salvation in spiritual creativity, which she now wanted to share with the world. There, she also thanked the community of kind people who supported her at the beginning of her journey, apparently referring to the crowdfunding donors. Everything looked professionally designed. Apparently, she hired someone to create the site with some of the money she raised. I found myself in two minds. On the one hand, it all seemed false and even pathetic. Laura was selling tinsel, hiding behind loud words about spirituality. On the other hand, at least she was trying to do something and not sitting on her hands. Perhaps part of me even respected this attempt to start from scratch, even if it was with my involuntary infusions through our house, left to her, and other people's donations. I didn't react to her business publicly. I just closed the page and tried to put it out of my mind. However, sometimes news about Soul Spark jewelry would still reach me. Mutual acquaintances mentioned that Laura had started an Instagram and was posting a lot of videos about the power of crystals and meditation. One of my old friends joked when we met, Mike, let's buy you an amulet, maybe you'll feel better. I just smiled bitterly in response. Deep down, I was in no mood for jokes. Although I had distanced myself from everything outwardly, there was still a wound inside. I didn't wish Laura any harm, probably not anymore, but I didn't feel any joy for her either. This whole spiritual craft seemed like another illusion to me, an attempt to escape from reality, just as she had once escaped from reality into the arms of the past, now into pseudo-spirituality. Time passed. I was told that Laura had finally quit her previous job and was now trying to live off the store's income. She even opened a tiny showroom in a rented office in the city center, where she invited everyone to personal talisman selection sessions. I just shook my head when I heard this. Apparently, the crowdfunding money was enough to cover rent and other expenses for a while. But for how long? I didn't follow it specifically, but sometimes curiosity got the better of me, and I went to her website to check how things were going. A couple of months after the launch, it became noticeable that the excitement had died down. There was almost no news on the page. The assortment had not been updated for a long time. According to rumors, few people visited the showroom. In the comments to her posts, questions from customers about delivery delays began to appear. It seems that Laura had problems. However, it was only a matter of time. I knew how saturated the market was with all sorts of spiritual goods. Finding clients all the time is not that easy, and living on it is even more so. I didn't feel any gloating, more like a dark confirmation of my fears. Her latest attempt seemed to be falling apart at the seams, and although it didn't formally concern me, I knew inside that Laura was likely to face new difficulties. 6 months after my departure, our trial took place. Laura, as promised, filed for divorce, demanding, among other things, monthly payments for her maintenance. The process lasted several sessions. I hired a good lawyer, although I hoped that everything would be resolved relatively peacefully. On the day of the final hearing, I saw Laura up close for the first time in a long time. We sat on opposite sides of the stuffy courtroom, each with her own lawyer. Laura looked tense, her eyes a mixture of stubbornness and worry. I was having a hard time myself, my heart pounding in my throat, my palms sweating. Laura's lawyer tried to make it sound like she was in dire financial straits after her husband left and deserved support. It was said that she had sacrificed her career for her family, which was not entirely true. She had worked all these years, albeit not in the highest-paying position. It was mentioned that she had fallen behind on her mortgage and was about to lose her home. My lawyer, however, emphasized that when we separated, I left her the house, the car, and most of our joint savings. That Laura had chosen to quit her job and start a business with her own money. That I had not shied away from my responsibilities, but had simply decided not to prevent her from keeping her property. The fact of her adultery was not directly discussed in the context of property. The law excluded it as irrelevant, but emotionally it hung in the air. When it was time for the parties to speak, Laura was the first to speak. She stood up, smoothed a strand of hair with a trembling hand, and spoke quietly. After my husband left, it was very hard for me. Her voice sounded plaintive. I was left alone with a house with debts. I supported him, our family, for many years. I gave up a lot for the sake of marriage, and now I have nothing. I looked down, hearing these words. Anger flared up in me. After all, she was distorting reality greatly, but perhaps she believed in her version. Then her lawyer, a tall, dry man with glasses, took the floor. He pounced on me with questions about my income and why I hadn't tried to support my wife financially after the separation. Mr. Brown, is it true that your annual income significantly exceeds your wife's? He asked sternly. I guess that's true, I admitted, feeling my hands clench into fists under the table. And yet, you stopped co-financing the mortgage, leaving that responsibility to Mrs. Brown, didn't you? He continued. I left her our savings and property, I replied, louder than I expected. My lawyer placed a warning hand on my shoulder, and I fell silent. Laura's lawyer pretended not to hear about the abandoned property. He kept going on about my duty of care and the dramatic decline in his client's standard of living due to my departure. I clenched my jaw, trying to remain calm. Fortunately, my lawyer soon had the opportunity to speak and laid out the facts clearly and without emotion. He emphasized that not only had I not left my wife without funds, but on the contrary, I had voluntarily given her everything we had acquired together. He also noted that Laura was young and able-bodied, and therefore capable of providing for herself. I felt deep gratitude to him for every word of truth. The judge, an elderly man with a tired look, listened to both sides. It lasted for several hours, although to me it seemed interminably long. At some point during the arguments, I caught Laura's eye. She was looking at me intently, as if searching my face for some kind of support or understanding. I looked away. My mouth was dry. I could feel beads of sweat on my forehead as the judge read the verdict. I kept my eyes on the bench, though every second of waiting felt like an hour. My hands were clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. Finally, when the final words of the decision had been spoken and the echoes had died away, I exhaled like a diver who had been underwater for a long time. Finally, the court announced its decision. The divorce was approved. The house officially went to Laura. I waived any rights to it. The car was also hers. As for financial support, the judge ruled that given the property transferred to the plaintiff and her working age, the husband was not obligated to pay her alimony. I was only supposed to compensate her for part of her legal costs at one time, and that was it. As the judge read these dry lines, I heard Laura exhale loudly. It was hard to tell whether in relief or disappointment. Her face was almost emotionless, as if she had turned to stone. Perhaps she had hoped for a different outcome until the very end. As we left the room, our eyes met again. I nodded slightly, a gesture that was more of a farewell than a congratulation. Laura said nothing and quickly turned away, blending into the crowd. Outside, my lawyer shook my hand and said a few stock phrases about a fair decision. I thanked him and stood on the courthouse steps, breathing in the cool autumn air. It was over. 10 years of marriage had officially been reduced to a signed agreement and a division of property. When I walked down the steps, Steve was waiting for me. He had taken the day off to support me in court. I hadn't known he was coming, but I was eternally grateful to see his tall figure standing by the column at the entrance. "Well, how is it?" he asked excitedly, stepping forward. I just nodded. "It's all over. Divorced. No alimony." Steve breathed a sigh of relief and put one arm around my shoulders. "Congratulations, buddy. It was worth it." We stood off to the side for a moment, letting lawyers and court visitors pass by. Steve was jabbering something encouraging like, "Let's celebrate properly now. Life goes on," but I was only half listening. I just felt good about having a friend around. "Let's go have lunch," Steve suggested. "My wife is making lasagna right now, and I promised to bring you if you were okay." I smiled weakly. "Thanks, Steve. Give me a couple of hours, and I'll come by myself, okay? I need to get myself together." He nodded understandingly and didn't insist. After patting me on the back goodbye, Steve headed to the car, and I lingered for a couple more minutes, catching my breath. That evening at home, I made a toast to myself to the end of that chapter of my life. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and drank it, feeling the warmth burn my throat. I was sad, but calm. I had done all I could. Laura had gotten everything she had ever wanted to keep her home, her property, and if her version of events was to be believed, her freedom from her domineering husband. Now her fate was entirely in her own hands. A few more months passed. After the trial, Laura and I no longer communicated. Each of us finally got busy with our own lives. I only heard bits of news about her through acquaintances. They said that her jewelry business had completely died out. New content stopped appearing. Apparently, she had run out of money and inspiration. She closed the showroom. And then came even worse news. Laura had lost her home, our once common home. I found out about it by chance when I bumped into a neighbor from the other street at the supermarket. Mrs. Rosen, an elderly lady, recognized me and immediately started gasping about how sorry she was that "your sweet wife lost her house, such a bummer." From her, I heard that the bank had taken our townhouse for non-payment of the mortgage. Laura had been evicted. Where she had gone after that, Mrs. Rosen didn't know. She only saw how the furniture and boxes were being taken away that day, and Laura standing on the porch, pale and as if lost. I thanked my neighbor for the information, assured her that everything was for the best, and took my leave. My heart was restless. Yes, logically, I understood that this was a natural ending. If I didn't pay, the house would be taken away. But the emotions were mixed. There was no gloating, only melancholy and bitterness. Was this how our story really ended? With the complete collapse of everything we had once built together. That evening, I sat behind the wheel for a long time, hesitating, but eventually I drove to our old street. It was already dark when I stopped in front of House No. 16, which had once been my home too. The windows were dark. A fresh lock with a bank seal hung on the door. The yard was overgrown with weeds apparently. I hadn't gotten around to tending it in the last few months. I walked around the back of the house to our former courtyard. The gate was ajar apparently. It had not been locked after the move out. Weeds had grown wild in the courtyard, and leaves covered the paths in a thick layer. For a moment, I imagined that I would see Laura tending her roses by the fence, as she did every summer. Here, in the courtyard, we used to host barbecue parties. I would grill steaks. Laura would treat guests to her signature lemonade with mint. Children's laughter, the clink of glasses, our dog running between the tables, begging for treats. It all seemed so distant, almost an alien life. I ran my hand over the cracked wooden railing on the terrace. The wood was damp and blackened. Perhaps this house, too, was experiencing its own tragedy. It was as if it had become an orphan, having lost those who filled it with laughter and warmth. I sighed quietly and headed back to the car. At one point, I couldn't resist looking through one of the living room windows. There was no furniture or curtains inside bare walls and an empty parquet floor. The rays of a street lamp pierced the dirty glass, picking out the outlines of a familiar layout. It seemed like I was seeing a ghost of our past. Our sofa stood here, where we watched movies in the evenings. Laura's bookcase, filled with novels and art albums, was against that wall. Now nothing. Just light shadows in the emptiness. I leaned my back against the trunk of our old maple tree by the gate and closed my eyes. There was no anger or resentment inside me, only a gnawing pity. For Laura, for my past self, for all those dreams that we once associated with this place. I don't know how long I stood there in silence. The night was quiet, except for the chirping of crickets and the distant noise of the highway. Finally, I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air sobering me up a bit. It was time to move on, literally and figuratively. I approached the gate and carefully touched the rusting metal handle. Goodbye, home. Goodbye, past life. With these thoughts, I turned around, got into the car, and drove away, trying not to look in the rearview mirror anymore. As I got into the car, a thought suddenly struck me. Where is Laura now? Having lost her home, she probably moved in with a friend or is renting a room somewhere. I remembered how exactly a year ago I myself left these walls for nowhere, leaving everything to her. Life makes strange circles. Now she is in a similar position. I thought about writing or calling her, asking if she needed help. But I quickly pushed the thought away. Our relationship was over, and she would hardly want to accept anything from me. Laura had her own pride, and the wounds were still fresh. Maybe later I would find a way to make sure she was okay, through mutual friends. But I would not interfere directly. Each of us needed to go our own way to the end on our own. It was only when I drove away from our neighborhood and onto the highway that I felt my eyes sting with tears. I didn't resist them. Let them flow. These were not tears of rage, but of mournful farewell. Before, I thought that I had cried out all my tears, but no, my heart found more drops for these walls, this past life. After a few minutes, I calmed down and wiped my face with the back of my hand. Well, now it really is all over. I closed the door, exhaled, and walked towards the car with a firm step. A new stage of life awaited me. After all the upheaval, I desperately needed a break. I decided to take a leave of absence from work and change the environment. My sister Jennifer had been inviting me to visit her in Minnesota for a long time, and I finally accepted her invitation. In late autumn, I boarded a plane heading east, backpack over my shoulder. Outside the window, clouds and sunset skies stretched out, and the tension of the past few months slowly dissipated within me. I looked forward to meeting my sister and her family, who had always been a safe haven for me. Jenny greeted me at the Minneapolis airport with a big hug. She was a couple of years younger, but sometimes it seemed like she was wiser than me. I saw such genuine joy in her smile that I couldn't help but smile widely for the first time in a long time. "Well, hello, brother," she said, holding me by the shoulders and looking at me appraisingly. "How are you?" "Little by little," I replied. "Now I think I'll be much better." She nodded understandingly and took my backpack, despite my protests. Her house was in a quiet suburb, drowning in withered November leaves. We were met on the porch by her nephew's two 7-year-old twin boys, noisy, cheerful. They immediately dragged me to show them their toys and drawings. I laughed, feeling my soul thaw amidst this childish hubbub. That evening, my sister and I sat in the kitchen with mugs of hot tea after the kids had fallen asleep and her husband was watching football in the living room. A cold wind howled outside, but my heart was warm. I told Jenny everything that had happened over the past year without the sharp pain, more like an observer from the outside. She listened attentively, occasionally shaking her head or sighing. "You know, I kept wondering how this happened," she said quietly when I finished. "Aren't you blaming yourself for something?" I shrugged. I used to blame her a lot. I thought, maybe I didn't pay her enough attention, romance, or something. But then I realized everyone makes their own choice. She made hers, and I probably made mine when I decided to leave. "I think you did the right thing," Jenny said softly, covering my hand with hers. "I can see it's been very difficult for you. But now it's like you've emerged from dark waters." I smiled sadly. "Perhaps. I'm still flapping my hands, but at least I can breathe." My sister hugged me. "You're strong, Mike, and kind. Not everyone could go through something like that without anger." "I didn't go through this without anger," I shook my head. "There was all sorts of things, both rage and resentment, until it all burned out completely. Now I feel almost nothing, only emptiness sometimes." "Emptiness will also pass," she answered confidently. "You know, like after a fire, first there's ashes, and then little by little something new begins to grow." I nodded. I really wanted to believe that something new and good really was waiting for me ahead. The next day, Jennifer took me for a walk to a nearby park. We walked along the shore of a small lake, along a frozen path. The air was crisp and fresh, our exhalations billowing white steam. The lake was thinly coated with ice along the shore, and a few ducks swam in the remaining open water. Around us, the frozen crust of grass and snow crunched softly under our feet. Nature was preparing for a long winter, and it reminded me of how life has its seasons, a time to stand still and a time to blossom. We discussed plans for the future. I admitted that I don't even know what I want next. Everything was planned out for so many years. Work, family, home. Now it's like a blank sheet of paper in front of me, and it's scary and exciting at the same time. "This is a chance," said the sister, turning up the collar of her coat from the cold wind. "You always wanted to travel, for example. You've been putting it off for so many years, first your career, then you couldn't get away for long with Laura. Maybe the time has come." I thought about it. Indeed, I had dreams that had been pushed into a corner. I once raved about driving through national parks, spending the night in a tent by the fire. Laura did not share this passion. She preferred the comfort of hotels, and the dream remained a dream. "You know, it's possible," I said, feeling a timid rise in my chest. "Take a long vacation, rent a trailer, and head off across the states." There, Jenny was delighted. "I remember how in school you wanted to go to Alaska on your own. Why not now?" I smiled, for the first time seriously imagining that I might take off on a trip. A wave of anticipation washed over me, a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time. The remaining days at my sister's place flew by. We talked a lot, laughed, played with my nephews. I hardly even thought about my problems. In one of our conversations, Jenny asked if I ever planned to let someone into my heart again. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "It's not a question for me yet. I'd like to figure it out myself first." She didn't press, she just remarked, "You'll meet a good person again, you'll see. Just be open to it when you're ready." I just shrugged. New love seemed like a ghost to me now. But deep down I admitted, what if someday? When saying goodbye, my sister put a small envelope in my hand. "Here's a list of places you simply must visit on your trip," she winked. "And some cash, don't tell the kids, they're already planning on a new Xbox." I laughed and shook my head, denying the money, but Jenny was adamant. The plane was taking me back home to California on a detour through Denver. Outside the window, the Rocky Mountains sparkled with snow. I looked at the white peaks and suddenly caught myself thinking that there might be something majestic and pure ahead, like these mountains. You just have to be unafraid to go there. Returning from my visit to my sister, I felt refreshed. Plans for my upcoming trip around the country were ripening in my head. It seemed that for the first time in a long time, I looked to the future with interest and not with melancholy. One afternoon, while getting ready for my hike, I stopped at a large shopping center to buy some gear. I needed a good sleeping bag and a couple of warm fleece jackets. The road ahead was through the mountains, and it was cold there. I was walking around a camping goods store, looking at the tents, when I suddenly heard a familiar voice behind me. "Mike?" I turned around. Laura was standing 2 steps away from me. She was wearing the store's uniform, a green t-shirt with the logo and a name tag. Her hair was tied in a ponytail, and she had light makeup on. She looked a little confused, probably as surprised as I was by the unexpected meeting. We looked at each other in silence for several long seconds. I found my voice first. "Hello, Laura." "Hello," she answered quietly. Her eyes dropped, then rose to me again. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Me too," I smiled wryly, trying to cope with the overwhelming excitement. My heart suddenly began to pound somewhere in my throat. "Do you work here?" Laura nodded, shrugging her shoulders. "Yes, I had to find a job. As a salesperson for now. Not exactly what I dreamed of, but you have to live on something." I nodded in response. There was an awkward silence. What to say to my ex-wife, whom I last saw in court? But Laura herself broke the silence. "How are you?" she asked timidly. "Not bad already," I answered honestly. "And you?" Laura sighed, looking down at the floor. "I'm getting used to everything again. I'm renting a small apartment now. I'm working." She spoke calmly, without the previous aggression or pathos. Her appearance showed fatigue, but somehow humble. I even felt uneasy. I suddenly realized that I no longer held a grudge against her. Standing before me was simply a person who had made mistakes and was paying for them. "I'm glad you're holding up," I said sincerely. Laura smiled sadly. "You're too kind, Mike, after everything I've done." She hesitated, swallowing the tears that were coming. I waited silently. Finally, she continued in a trembling voice. "You know, I wanted to write to you so many times. To tell you, just to tell you how sorry I am. For everything. For that betrayal, for the lies, for what I did later." She bit her lip, trying to hold back. I felt a lump in my throat. I had probably been waiting for these words all this time, and now they were spoken. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Laura continued, wiping the corners of her eyes. "I know I didn't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that you were a good husband. I'm the one who ruined it, and I'm so, so sorry." Tears glistened on her eyelashes. Shoppers were walking around, some were casting curious glances, but at that moment for me, there were only the two of us and the echo of her words. I sighed quietly and replied, "Thank you for saying that." Laura met my gaze. "Will you ever be able to forgive me?" There was such a pleading tone in her voice that I involuntarily stepped closer and, without thinking, gently hugged her. She shuddered in surprise, but did not pull away. I felt her sob softly into my shoulder. "Laura," I said softly, "I forgave you a long time ago." She pulled away, looking at me with a mixture of distrust and hope. "Is it true?" "It's true," I confirmed. "I needed it to move on. We both made mistakes, just different ones. I don't hold a grudge against you." Laura covered her face with her hand, catching her breath. It felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "You have no idea how important this is to me," she whispered. We stood there in silence for another minute. Then she wiped her eyes and tried to smile. "You look good, better than a year ago." "Thank you," I smiled with the corners of my lips. "I'm okay now." "I'm glad," she said seriously. "You deserve to be happy." "You too, Laura," I replied. "Take care, okay?" She nodded. Someone from across the department called out to her, and Laura looked there, then back at me. I have to go. Work, she said guiltily. Of course, I let her go, taking a step back. It was nice to talk. Laura moved away uncertainly, but after a couple of steps, she turned around. Mike. Yes. Good luck to you. In everything. Good luck to you too, Laura, I answered quietly. She held my gaze for a moment longer, then walked away between the tent racks. I watched her go, feeling a strange calm. The parting words hung in the air, and with them, the farewell of two people who had once been close, and now had finally let each other go. Racks of tents and sleeping bags towered around us, and store music played softly in the distance. I noticed the Outdoor World logo on her badge, and couldn't help but think of the time we used to shop at stores like this together before our travels. That was all in the past now. For a few minutes, I stood between the rows of tents, trying to comprehend what had just happened. It seemed incredible how strangely our paths had intertwined. A year ago, Laura had hidden the truth from me under the guise of a retreat, and now I had truly come to know myself, having gone through loneliness. And now we were meeting again, as different people. I felt a bittersweet relief. Our story had truly ended peacefully and without hatred, and each of us had our own path ahead. I took a deep breath and exhaled. I still had to choose a sleeping bag and sweaters after all. Life went on. A few weeks after my chance meeting with Laura, I hit the road. I rented a small camper van, a cross between a car and a motorhome. It held everything I needed: a sleeping bag, a camp stove, food and water, and, most importantly, my determination to see the world beyond my old life. The winter sun was shining brightly the day I left San Francisco and headed north on the 101. I opened the window to let in the cool sea breeze and felt a sense of anticipation filling my soul. Far ahead, beyond the horizon, new places and experiences awaited me. I hadn't planned out a route, just marked interesting points along the way. That was the beauty of it. No rush, no time pressure, just me and the road. The first stop was Redwood National Park. Giant sequoias towered over the ground like columns of an ancient temple. I wandered among these giants, head thrown back, and felt like a small part of a huge world. Here, in the silence of the forest, the experiences of the previous year seemed like something far away. I remembered my sister's words about how life is reborn after a fire. In the same way, green shoots of ferns were breaking through the fallen needles under the sequoias. That night, I set up camp in a picturesque clearing. I lit a small fire and sat by it, wrapped in a warm blanket. The stars twinkled in the sky between the treetops. Buddy, my faithful dog, sat next to me, his side pressed against my legs, of course. I took him along on the trip. What kind of a hike would it be without a dog? He snorted quietly, catching the scents of the night forest with his nose. I took out the notebook Jenny had given me before I left and began writing down my thoughts. I wanted to preserve every feeling of this freedom. I wrote about how grateful I was to fate that I had escaped the stifling cage of resentments and regrets, about how forgiveness had freed me, and about how wonderful it was to simply be here and now without the burden of the past and the fear of the future. After finishing a few pages, I put my pen down and leaned closer to the fire. Suddenly, I started to shiver, and it wasn't the cool night air that was the cause. Tears started to stream down my cheeks. At first, I didn't even understand why I was crying, but then I realized these were tears of relief. The pain had finally subsided. I allowed myself to quietly cry out all the loneliness I had accumulated under the cover of the kindly giant sequoias. Buddy became agitated and nuzzled my knee, and I gently patted him. Soon the tears dried up, and I felt an incredible lightness. It seemed that just a little more and my chest would fill with new air, clean and fresh, like the night sky above my head. A couple of days later, I continued east. The roads took me through the snowy peaks of the Sierra Nevada, through the endless deserts of Nevada, where at night the bottomless starry sky hung overhead. I stopped at roadside motels or slept right in the van under the open sky. Somewhere in Utah, admiring the red rocks of the canyons at sunset, I met an elderly couple of travelers, Ron and Margaret. They had been driving their trailer across America for 6 months, being retired. We started talking in the parking lot of an observation deck. Having learned that I had gone on my first such trip in a long time, they invited me to tea at their campfire that evening. That night, sitting under the stars outside Ron and Margaret's trailer, I listened to their stories. They had been together for 40 years, and they had been through a lot of hardships, Ron recalling the time he almost lost his business, Margaret recounting her midlife battle with illness. But now, looking at them, I saw two people smiling happily, their eyes shining with warmth for each other. "Anything can happen, Michael," Ron said, stirring the tea in a metal pot. "The main thing is to always remember that after a black streak, there will always be a bright one. And sometimes what seems like the end is actually the beginning of something new." I nodded, warming my hands on the mug. "At first I thought my story was over," I admitted, looking at the fire. "But now I realize that maybe it's just beginning." Margaret smiled softly at me. "That's true, my dear. Life has a wonderful way of giving second chances to those who are open to it." That night, I returned to my camp with a special peace in my soul. The words of my new friends echoed like warm music somewhere inside. I lay down in my sleeping bag next to Buddy, who was quietly snoring, and stared at the ceiling of the van for a long time before falling asleep. I thought about how many good things could still be ahead, if only I believed in them. My journey continued. I passed majestic Denver, crossed the snowy plains of Nebraska, and headed further north. With each passing day, I felt my heart fill with lightness. When I woke up in the morning, I no longer felt the heaviness that had haunted me for almost a year. In its place came curiosity about life, about people, about the world around me. One morning, stopping at a small roadside diner in South Dakota, I caught my reflection in the window. Tanned face, short beard, calm in my eyes, I barely recognized my former self, that withdrawn and depressed person. Now there was no trace of him. Ahead of me lay another great goal. I was determined to get to Alaska, as I had once dreamed of in my youth. An adventure, perhaps, but it no longer frightened me. I was learning to enjoy the unexpected again and to look boldly into the distance. The last miles of the journey to Alaska were a real challenge. I drove along the snow-covered roads of Canada's Yukon, with miles of white silence stretching ahead. In winter, daylight hours are short, and I often had to drive in the twilight, peering into the distant glare of lonely oncoming trucks. One night, a severe snowstorm began on the pass. There was no one around, only swirls of snow dancing in the beams of the headlights. My van stubbornly climbed the mountain, the engine humming with strain. At some point, the wheels skidded on an icy patch, and the car froze, illuminating the chaos of snowflakes with its light. I tried to drive out, but only got stuck deeper in a snowdrift on the side of the road. For a second, fear rose in my throat. It was pitch dark, the snowstorm was getting worse, there was no connection. But then I pulled myself together. After all, it was not the first time I had encountered difficulties. I put on a warm jacket and went outside. The icy wind lashed my face, but I took out a shovel prudently bought in the South and began to dig snow out from under the wheels. Buddy whined inside the car, but obediently waited. About 20 minutes later, when my hands were already numb, headlights appeared ahead. A heavy SUV was slowly approaching me. It stopped nearby, and a strong, bearded man in a down jacket climbed out of the cabin. "Stuck, buddy," he shouted over the howling wind. "A little," I replied, shaking the snow off my face. The stranger returned to the car and soon came to me with a tow rope. Together, we hooked my van to his powerful Jeep. Within minutes, my mobile home was pulled back onto the road. "Thank you so much," I shouted, drowning out the howling of the blizzard. The man waved his hand. "I can't leave you here. Stay behind me. The descent will be easier from here." He said his name Jack, I think, but I couldn't make it out in the wind. I just nodded. There are good people even in the most remote places. This thought warmed me better than the heater in the salon. A couple of hours later, we descended the pass together. Down in the small valley below, The lights of a gas station and a roadside motel gleamed dimly civilization. I thanked my rescuer with hot coffee in the motel cafe. We chatted for a while. He turned out to be a truck driver on his way to Fairbanks. I told him briefly about my journey and how Alaska had been a goal of mine since my youth. Jack slapped me on the shoulder and laughed. Well, now your youthful dream will come true. Alaska won't let you down, believe me. Just be careful up there, the weather is harsh. After saying goodbye to him, I spent the night in a motel and warmed up. The next morning, the snowstorm died down, and I continued on my way. A day later, I finally crossed the Alaska border. When I saw the roadside sign, "Welcome to Alaska," my heart skipped a beat. I stopped, got out, and walked up to the sign. The snow crunched quietly under my feet. Leaning my hand on the wooden column of the sign, I looked around. All around were endless forests, mountains on the horizon, a pale blue sky. "I've arrived," I said quietly to myself. Buddy barked happily, as if he understood my feeling. I laughed and patted him on the back of the neck. Warmth spread through my chest. The dream I had cherished for so many years had become a reality, and I had realized it alone on my own, having overcome not only thousands of kilometers, but also the storm in my own soul. I spent about 2 weeks in Alaska. I drove as far as Fairbanks, then went down to Anchorage, admiring the fabulous landscapes along the way. I saw majestic glaciers, met reindeer right on the highway, and one night I watched the mesmerizing northern lights, painting the sky with green and purple waves. I stood with my head thrown back, unable to take my eyes off them. Flaming ribbons of light slowly flowed across the sky, changing shades from green to purple and back. There was complete silence around, only my heart pounded loudly with delight. Never before had I seen anything like this. At that moment, I felt like a part of the endless universe, where all the troubles and worries of man are just tiny sparks compared to this greatness of nature. The northern lights seemed to wash away the remnants of my pain, filling my soul with awe. From Anchorage, I took a day trip to Prince William Sound. There, on the deck of a tour boat, I was lucky enough to see whales. A huge humpback whale emerged from the icy waters of the ocean very close to the boat, releasing a fountain of spray. Everyone on deck gasped with delight. I caught myself laughing like a child, looking at this miracle of nature. Another day, already returning along the highway to the north, a moose unexpectedly crossed the road right in front of my van. Huge, majestic, it slowly disappeared into the forest, and for a long time I could not recover from my amazement. It seemed that Alaska itself was testing me with gifts, both dangers and unforgettable encounters with wildlife. Often, sitting by yet another fire in the wild forest, I thought, how far I have gone not in a geographical sense, but within myself. A year ago, I could hardly imagine that I would sit alone in the snow and I would feel good. That loneliness would not be a punishment, but a gift at time when you get to know your true self. When my journey ended, I was no longer the same person who left home with a broken heart. I felt renewed strength and a desire to live on, to try, to take risks, to love, yes, to love again if fate smiled. Because now I knew that even if you were hurt, you could heal and become even stronger. A few months after returning from my trip, I look at life differently. I returned to California at the beginning of the summer, tanned, with a thick beard and shining eyes. That's what Steve joked when he first saw me after a long break. Friends said that I was unrecognizable. Instead of a sullen and tense person, they see a relaxed, confident man. And I admit, I hardly recognize myself sometimes. My new home is small, just 2 rooms, but it is bright and cozy. I have hung photographs from my travels on the walls. The Utah mountains at sunset, the northern skies glowing over Alaska, me and Buddy against the backdrop of a giant sequoia. These images remind me every day of the journey I have taken. Instead of the old, bulky furniture, I now have a minimum of things, just my favorite soft sofa, a bookshelf with guidebooks and photo albums, and a kitchen where I learn to cook new dishes. Every day I wake up early, walk out onto the porch with a cup of coffee, and listen to the waves crashing in the distance. In those moments, I feel a deep calm, the same calm I've been striving for all year, making my way through pain and loss. I'm back at my old job, but without the same fanaticism. I now clearly separate my time for work and for life. I no longer stay late in the office in the evenings just for the sake of it, but I often go to the beach with Buddy or meet up with friends. I recently started volunteering on weekends at a local hiking club, leading groups of enthusiasts on hikes along coastal trails. I enjoy sharing my love of nature with others. Today, for example, I was leading a group of newbies on a coastal trail to the cliffs of Pine Ridge. We set out before dawn, and by the time we reached the top of the cliff, the sun was just peeking out over the ocean, painting the sky gold. One of the participants, an older man, thanked me in a trembling voice. He had long dreamed of seeing something like this with his own eyes. I smiled at him and realized that I shared his joy. I had found something that filled me with meaning and brought joy to others. Sometimes I reread the notes in the notebook I kept on the road. There are so many thoughts, discoveries, small joys of each day of the journey. Perhaps someday I will rework them into a book or a blog if I dare. For now, they serve as a reminder of the path I have taken internally. I haven't heard much about Laura. A couple of mutual friends mentioned that she moved to another city, trying to restart her career in marketing. I hope she succeeds. I hold no grudge against her. We've both let go of the past. Recently, while sorting through old things, I came across our wedding photo. We were young, happy, looking at each other that day without a shadow of a doubt. I looked at this picture for a long time, expecting a stab of pain or anger. But I felt only quiet sadness and gratitude. Yes, gratitude for those good moments that we had. They are also a part of my life and made me who I am. I carefully put the photo back in the envelope and put it aside. The past should remain the past. There's a whole life ahead of me. I'm 40 now, and I read somewhere that life only begins at 40. I smile when I think about it. I guess that's true, at least for me. I don't have a clear plan for what my next 10 years will be like, but that doesn't scare me. Maybe I'll meet a woman I want to share my happiness with, and hopefully I'll be able to make her happy. Or maybe I'll live as a bachelor, traveling and enjoying my freedom. Whatever happens, I know that I can cope with everything if I keep believing in myself and don't hold on to what's gone. I'm not dating anyone seriously yet. I decided to give myself time. But I'm not close to new acquaintances anymore. On the advice of the same restless Steve, I went on a couple of blind dates, and although nothing serious came of them, the very fact that I could casually communicate with a new woman over a cup of coffee meant a lot. I felt, my heart is able to let in warmth again. So when fate throws me a meeting with the one, I will be ready. Sometimes the hardest trials turn into a path to self-knowledge. Strangely, I went on my real self-knowledge retreat, not when it was announced, but when I was alone. The path was long and difficult, but at the end I found what I was looking for: peace of mind and a new perspective on life. That evening, I lock the door of my house, grab my car keys, and whistle for Buddy, who runs up, wagging his tail. We get in my truck and drive down the coast road. The sunset paints the sky orange and pink. The open window lets in the salty breeze. I look out at the endless ocean, sparkling in the setting sun, and I realize that my heart is filled with a quiet joy. How important it is to simply live, to breathe, to feel, to love. Now I know this for sure. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.